It wasn't until 7 years later where literally I was making it in life, where I was handcuffed and taken out of my office in Monterey, California, only to go to court back in Philadelphia because my name came up in the dealer's book when he got busted. And the DA in Philadelphia said, here's a Philadelphia Eagle that might be able to spill on other Philadelphia Eagles. Let's go after him. And the scariest part of this was they wanted to give me 15 years. And I'm saying, are you kidding me? I've been clean for almost 7 years and you're coming back to me?
This is Andrew Petty is Dying, where we tap into the power of our mortality to become the people we were made to be and live the lives we were made to live. I'm your host, Andrew Petty, and I'm dying. I hate to say it, but so are you. I met Dennis Franks through a mutual friend, or even more accurately, a friend of my parents, back when I was a little boy in Boone, North Carolina. Serendipitously, Bonnie Church had gotten curious about what I was up to and looked me up online, where she found this podcast. And almost overnight, she became an unexpected, very welcome, and very generous source of encouragement and inspiration. She also happens to have co-written a book with Dennis and his good friend, former Philadelphia Eagles teammate Vince Papale. And Bonnie realized that Dennis's story was a good fit for Andrew Petty is Dying, which is how we ended up here today, with former pro football turned network marketing success story Dennis Franks as the guest on this episode. I share this backstory because it highlights a big idea that I think is useful for all of us to remember. When we commit to becoming the person we were made to be and living the life we were made to live, and we persevere in that work, as I've been trying to do through this podcast, for example, cool things happen. Like getting reconnected with Bonnie and striking up a friendship with Dennis. That's the technical term, by the way, cool things. Truth is, you never really know what will come of it all, but that's part of the adventure. And each new serendipitous moment creates the potential for more. It's the best kind of compounding interest. Dennis Franks is a primo example of someone who has persevered in becoming the person he was made to be and living the life he was made to live. Along the way, he found success and fame in the NFL, and he's achieved remarkable success in business post-football. But it hasn't been all rainbows and unicorns. Far from it, in fact. And Dennis has fought tooth and nail for every bit of success he's attained, and to learn the lessons available from his failures. And a close encounter with mortality woke him up to what mattered most, and kicked his butt in gear big time after the fumes of football fame had dissipated. We dig into all of that and more in this interview. The internet can give you a version of Dennis's story, and it's one that's available to anyone who cares to type in Dennis Franks in the Google search window. But I was especially interested in the rest of the story. What's Dennis Franks really all about? What makes him tick? How does an encounter with mortality impact a man who, for a while at least, seemed to have it all? After all of his ups and downs, moments of fame and seasons of ridicule, what wisdom for life does he have to offer to all of us? To set the stage, though, here's the Cliff Notes version of what can be learned online about Dennis. From humble beginnings in Pittsburgh, the son of a steelworker and a German figure skating champion, Dennis had a noteworthy college football career at Michigan and went on to 5 years in the NFL, first with the Philadelphia Eagles, then with the Detroit Lions. Along with Vince Papale, about whose story the film Invincible was made with Mark Wahlberg in the starring role, Dennis had a hand in setting the Eagles up for their first Super Bowl appearance in 1981. A rough patch after football was followed by Dennis's discovery of the world of network marketing, a business he has excelled at ever since. In fact, early on, he became one of the few to earn over $1 million in annual commissions through a home-based business. Today, Dennis is Executive Vice President of Market America Worldwide, a product brokerage and internet marketing company that specializes in one-to-one marketing and social shopping. Market America provides a system for entrepreneurs to supplement their income and gives customers a better way to shop. Dennis's book, The Last Laugh, Vision to Victory, outlines 7 keys to making your dream a reality: vision, valor, vehemence, veracity, vitality, vigor, and finally victory. And it illustrates them at work through his and Vince's stories and first-hand accounts from the likes of Dick Vermeil, Jim Harbaugh, and others who have had extraordinary success in their fields. Like Dennis, The Last Laugh is direct, no BS, eminently practical, and full of wisdom. If you want to get from here to there, The Last Laugh will help you. It's helped me. Dennis and his wife, Nancy, live in Greensboro, North Carolina. They have 2 daughters and 2 grandchildren. Okay, that's plenty of preamble. Let's jump in. I think a great entry point for us today is one that relates very much to the message of this podcast around mortality, because you described an experience that changed your life. And I hope you'd be willing to share that experience with us and how it changed your life. What's going on?
Okay, Andrew, I have to tell you one thing. The one defining moment that changed my life is that near-death experience. But, it wasn't because I didn't have success in my life. It was after I experienced success and then failure and then not knowing where to go. And as a result, I turned towards throwing my weight around. I wasn't a nice guy. Okay. And I started drinking more. And back in the 80s, drugs were very prevalent. They are today, but, not so many synthetic ones, the old fashioned drug of cocaine. And I had an addiction after a while. And one weekend, after 36 hours of going hard, it was like my chest was going to explode. I couldn't sit down, pounding, and thank goodness for an amazing friend to be able to take me and say, hey, this is not the end. We're going to start walking, and we're going to keep walking until you're coming back to me. And it was a huge change in my life because there was so much talk during that time of resetting almost and trying to understand that I had something more to live for and not to be this waste. Don't be that one and done, star. And now that you can't have that anymore, it's over. And it couldn't be, because I was 29 years old. I had a lot of years to live. And that was a critical time for me. And thank God for that woman, because that friend ended up now being my wife for 40 years together next year. So the one thing I will say is that everything changed because of that near-death experience. There was a realization that there had to be more.
I mean, there's obviously so much in that one moment. There's so much that brought you up to that one moment. More than we could ever hope to unpack in one conversation. But you wrote in your book that moment compelled you to quit cold turkey, an addiction that is tremendously difficult, from what I understand, to break. And I mean, the power of that moment where you realize I'm killing myself allowed you to break that addiction. That's tremendous.
Well, you have to understand, everything leading up to it was finish my pro football career. And a lot of people don't know this. Yeah, I have 5 years in the league, but I chose to leave the National Football League. I did not get cut. I was just finished. I lost my love for the game. And I can't do anything that I'm not passionate about. So I said, let me use my education and let me go back to the big city of Philadelphia, where I spent the majority of my professional career at, and I'm going to get a job. I can do something. Well, after enough no's and not enough experience, and finding a job that paid me about $20,000 a year after making a high 6-figure income, you are unable to meet your financial responsibilities. So the burden of those financial responsibilities piled onto the fact that you're a loser because you could just use your body for a living, and you're not, the kind of person that people want to invest in you in business to excel. And then all of a sudden, the party part of it came in, and you started to escape the environment. It was wrong, but still I had a name from pro sports, so everybody wanted to buy me a drink or share what they had, and it just got worse. And to the point that I was constantly escaping versus refocusing.
That's a toxic combination, having the lingering adulation of fans continuing to pump up that part of you that, you thrived on for a time, which was, this is me, I'm a pro football player. But then you've got the gnawing realization that I'm not sure who I am. And apparently being who I was isn't adequate to create the next chapter of my life. What a toxic combination. And it makes a ton of sense that if you begin to get slowly sort of accustomed to things that at least temporarily, lessen that mental and emotional static that you're experiencing, that it would get a grip on you.
Yes, and I think one of the things that helped me stop was the fear that I had, the fact that it was going to be over, and I don't think my story was ready to be over, and so it was the fear that really helped me. But I do want to caution everyone that from this experience, it wasn't until 7 years later that it came back, where literally I was making it in life, where I was handcuffed and taken out of my office in Monterey, California, only to go to court back in Philadelphia because my name came up in the dealer's book when he got busted. And the DA in Philadelphia said, here's a Philadelphia Eagle that might be able to spill on other Philadelphia Eagles. Let's go after him. And the scariest part of this was, and this, they wanted to give me 15 years. They were going after maximum sentence. And I'm saying, are you kidding me? I've been clean for almost 7 years, and you're coming back to me with a conspiracy to distribute. And let me just say this, a lot of people don't understand this. When you have a habit, you're not using social amounts. You are buying larger amounts. And you find out that when you have those drugs, you're the life of the party. Everybody wants to be there because they're going to get something. And, be cautious. Even if you've had a bad run in your life, know that even after you clean yourself up, it's going to come back sometime, and get you. I'm proud of what we've gotten through here, and I'm not ashamed because it happens to so many people. But the bottom line is, if you can face it, if you can face your fears, you can get through them. And that was a huge lesson for me. And once again, the friend that walked me through that long night when I thought I was dying, she was there to help me through this part of my life.
You got a good one, Dennis. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I will say that. Yes.
For different reasons, around 23, because of debilitating anxiety showing up, found alcohol and learned quickly that, hey, this is useful on in one sense. It does provide some temporary relief. It provides an ability to socialize and things where the anxiety was really prohibiting that. And thankfully, with the help of others and a realization, kind of like you, that if I keep this up, then I will die early. And my brother-in-law's cancer battle and his eventual death, those are parts of the mortality theme in my own story that just slapped me upside the head and said, hey, Petty, this isn't the way. And I feel very fortunate to have had mortality confront me like that. And I think you are expressing gratitude that mortality did the same for you. And what would you say to folks who are maybe realizing, as you're sharing your story, or I'm sharing mine around alcohol, that they're kind of moving into that pattern that could lead to some destructiveness and to really running their lives off the rails? What do you see better now about that period of your life? Where were there off ramps, or what do you know about yourself that you could have addressed differently potentially? I'm not saying go back and change. I'm just saying, what do you know better now that you have the benefit of hindsight?
Well, first, there's two things that come to mind. Number one, there's no such thing as a social hit of cocaine. It's going to ask you to keep coming back. And number two, if you recognize the environment that it weighs heavily, negatively on you, causing you through peer pressure or temptation, you got to get rid of that environment. And that was one of the big things that helped me stop. And I just know I'd leave. I wouldn't be there. Friends, no longer were friends. It had to be that way. Those are the two things. So it's in the environment. And then also there's no such thing as a social drink if you have a problem.
Yeah, there's no healthy dose.
Right. And, Andrew, the other thing that I was dealing with is I was almost 300 pounds. I was an offensive lineman. And the average lifespan of a National Football League offensive lineman was like 52 years old.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so there was another realization saying, okay, I'm almost 30. Let me subtract, oh man, that's another 22 years. That's it. And I was having this conversation with my wife the other day. I said, I never expected to live past 50 because I had the pedal to the floor a lot,
Yeah.
It was really something. So obesity came into effect too. I wasn't moving people for a living anymore physically. There was no reason to be 295 pounds. And today I'm 230 pounds. This is my high school weight. And I've been successful in keeping it off for over 25 years. And that was another recognition, So even though there are times that you think you're going to die, there's going to be more times, you start thinking about, what's happening here. Am I promoting myself to mortality? We want to extend the experience. So that was another area that right during that time I had to deal with.
You've had this near-death experience. It is, shaking you by the scruff of the neck, and you've made some dramatic changes. But I remember I don't know if it was in the book or another interview of yours that I listened to. You said, "Hey, I'm a 300-pound single guy with no money, and I've had this near-death experience. Where do you go from there? What was the change?"
Well, you realize that there's more in life, and you don't want to stop the story before it's completed. And there was a recognition there. The bottom line was I had to do something about health then, because I knew being overweight was not good for blood pressure, was not good for joints, was not good for a lot of things in our life. And so that had to become a priority. And I started that journey, so it wasn't just breaking from the drug addiction. Now it's breaking the addiction of food and fast food and convenience and, my drinking. I had to cut down on my natural beverages of barley and hops, kind of thing. Everything had to change. But the recognition was it wasn't going to be a change forever. It wasn't that I had to give up everything for life. It was a temporary adjustment. You had to call an audible in your life and to get you back into where you need to be to move forward. It doesn't mean you can't do the things you love, but it's more in moderation. And all of this, I was fortunate enough to have people around me that would feed me this type of information that made sense to me. And that's why in life it is so important, Andrew, to always have people around you that care about you, who you are, kind of thing. And people that I like to think are better than me. I'm not afraid to be the person that doesn't know everything. I prefer to be the person that can learn everything on a daily basis.
That reminds me of probably the one phrase or sentence that stuck out the most to me from your book. And I don't know if this will strike you as odd or not, but at the end of the part of your book where you and Vince are both sharing in pretty short order, short form, your stories, it's sort of an interlude between sharing the Victor's Code, the 7 V's that you and Vince Papali have come up with. You share your stories. And at the very end of that, you say, "Glean what you can from my life." It's both a cautionary tale and an application of the Victor's Code. And there's such a spirit of humility and vulnerability in that statement, because you're saying, "Hey, I've lived a life. I'm living a life. There's some stuff you can learn from the positive experiences, and there's plenty you can learn from the mistakes that I've made." And what you just said about, wanting to have people around you who are better than you and can pull you along is another testament to that humility. I can imagine that served you very well, especially post NFL, as you've built a new business career.
Absolutely. And you know what? It was never leading with name or, "Hey, look what I've done." It's just me, the son of a steel worker, struggling to get out of that future of working in the mill and getting a shot through sports and finishing that and now moving to that next level. I want people to understand through this journey that you're not born, a superstar. It's a choice to utilize your God's given talents. Are you willing to spend the time to become, what you were meant to be? And so many people don't have that vision. And that's a big part of the vision to victory concept, because I want everyone to realize you can if you believe you can, and if you're willing to do the things necessary to make that happen. So yes, I'm very humble because I am fortunate to have opportunities that I was not afraid to take the shot, whether it was hit or miss. There's a saying that winners never lose; they just learn. Kind of thing.
Yeah, that's big. And that's actually a great segue because you mentioned you're the son of a steel worker, and I want to take the tape back even further, kind of rewind even further in your story, because part of your story that I couldn't find much, if anything, about other than understanding you were from the Pittsburgh area and the son of a steel worker, and in that part of our culture, I just didn't know much about your childhood. And I'm really curious about that. What are a couple key ways that your childhood? I'm especially interested in your relationship with your dad. A couple key ways that your childhood and your relationship with your dad influenced the man you've become today.
Well, there is no question in my life growing up. My father is Italian, my mother is German and Chinese. They met during the war.
German and Chinese.
Yes.
No kidding. Interesting.
Yes. My mom was orphaned. She was a child born out of wedlock with a Chinese dignitary and a German housekeeper. And
oh my goodness.
Yes, she is quite the story too, because she went on to become the national champion of Germany in figure skating. Dad, he was a promoter his entire life. He was a boxer. He did what he had to do in regards to making the best of it, but he was highly disciplined and he was real good. If you didn't follow through, you were going to pay the consequences, which usually was a trip to the garage. We had a separate garage where he taught us some discipline, or he would make us work long hours, crazy stuff like dig a hole and fill it up, kind of thing. But he was going to make sure that whatever the reason was, it was going to stick, that you don't want to go there again. To the point that if mom said to my brother Donald, who was awesome, he is a nuclear engineer, he's a great swimmer, a very successful guy today in the auto industry. But mom would say, if you don't straighten up, I'm going to tell dad, and he was the kind of father that when he came back from work, we could tell what kind of day he had is how fast he lifted the garage door, or was it fast or was it just like slow and easy,
So fast would have meant furious, right?
Like fast was going to be, you better be real good when he comes through the door, because he wasn't going to take anything. But he also was the kind of guy that promoted us to get involved, but he always reminded us, don't get involved unless you finish what you start. The other thing is that I didn't know what kind of income we made. I don't think we made a lot, but mom taught ice skating lessons, and he would sharpen ice skates for extra money besides working at the mill. We grew up in an alleyway. We were in a row home. There were basically 4 homes attached with each one. But it was awesome. We had our own little alley to play in. We didn't have to worry about a lot of cars coming through. It was what I would hope for every child to grow up with. Playing until the street lights went on, hanging out, at the corner, with your buddies. And it was pretty awesome. Walk with your brother to the public swimming pool. Nobody had a swimming pool in their backyard. I was raised a lot by my older sister too. So it was traditional family. And even today, even with all the people that I work with, it's always family first. If there is an issue at home, you take care of it. The team will pick up whatever we have to pick up until you get through what you have to get through. That is just standard operating procedure in my life and with the people around me. And it's helped me build very large organizations and a successful business career.
And you trace a lot of that orientation simply to your upbringing, that value was in place when you were growing up.
Yes. And I have to say something. I have not been, I don't know how to say this. I don't know if I was disciplined enough when I raised my own children. Because I worked so much, I always wanted to give them what I didn't have. And I don't know if that's good or if that's bad. We've inspired them to be successful in their life. But sometimes I wonder as a parent, you're a parent, am I a good parent? What defines a good parent? I love my children. Do they love me? Do they listen to what I have to say? Or was it like I never knew my daughters dated and because my wife wouldn't tell me? It was always a group going out. They were never going out with a boyfriend. They were going out with a group. And that was what they would say back then. But yeah, there's always questions on that. But definitely the disciplines of growing up, the value of saving. I mean, Dad always said, "Penny, save your pennies for a rainy day. You're going to need them." And he'd always say, "Put 10% of anything you earn, put it away for a later time. Pay yourself first." That was it. Pay yourself first. And I still do that today.
From everything that I can see online and from what little conversations you and I have had so far, it's clear there's just a ton of passion and drive within you. And what part of that do you attribute to the environment you grew up in and the culture of your family and the town you're in? And what a part of that do you think is just part of Dennis Frank's?
Well, I think it's a huge part because I grew up in Western Pennsylvania in a time when, Friday night football was big. They always talk about Texas Friday night lights. Well, I have to tell you, Western Pennsylvania was the gold mine, the gold standard for athletes. Your Joe Namaths, the Mike Ditkas, the Joe Montanas. I mean, we all came from a 20, 25-mile radius from the different high schools. I remember playing against Tony Dorsett. For those who don't know, he's a Hall of Famer. He was with the Dallas Cowboys. He went to Hopewell High School, and I remember being a linebacker. And who was this kid? Like he was there and then he wasn't. It was like, what happened? Where'd he go? Whoa, I didn't see anything. But there was so much talent there. It was just so spectacular. And I remember everybody coming out and supporting. My mom would help me do my chores. My dad wouldn't let me go to practice unless my chores were done. So my mom would come out and help me get my chores done. And then I could walk over to the high school. We didn't live too far from it and go ahead. And I was baseball. I was track, and I was in football. I tried basketball, but the only time they used me is when they wanted me to foul out because somebody was playing too well.
You were the hit man.
Yeah, I guess so. I had the white man's disease. I couldn't get much elevation.
Right. So there's plenty of passion and drive from your home environment. One of the interesting moments in your story was when you went from the Eagles to the Lions, and quickly just started. You were at odds with your teammates because in your opinion, they didn't care to play and they weren't playing hard. And you were just so irritated by the fact that they would show up and not want to play. I mean, that was just how you were. It turns out the coach turns around and make you special teams captain because he saw, hey, this guy's got some drive. I love that story.
Yeah, he cared.
Yeah, you cared.
Yeah. 3 fights in the first game against Atlanta. And I tell my dad that, and he said, well, what happened? Well, I said all 3 fights with my teammates.
Yeah.
And it was the craziest thing. Everybody do your job. If everybody does their job on a team, then progress. That's how you build champions. You don't worry about somebody else's performance. You worry about your performance. And, when teams reach that level of the playoffs, win divisions, get into the Super Bowl, those players are taking that responsibility. Bill Belichick is notorious for telling people, just do your job. And whatever responsibilities, you've got to follow through with it.
Before we jump out of this part of your story and back into more of the present day, there's a little transition in your life that I can't find much information about elsewhere. And that's that your German mom, who was the German national figure skating champion, taught you and your siblings to figure skate as well. And you spent quite a bit of time doing that. And you've even said in other contexts that you enjoyed it. I mean, you enjoyed it. I don't know how much you enjoyed it, but then you got into high school and it sounds like figure skating just faded into the distance. What is your recollection of what happened for you in that transition?
Oh, goodness gracious. So, of course, when Dad wasn't around, my brother, my sister, and myself needed to go to the ice rink where she taught. And we were known as rink rats.
All right, hold on. When your dad wasn't around, what does that
Right.
mean?
Well,
Because he didn't dig it or what?
no, he wasn't always there. He worked overtime to pick up.
Okay, so it wasn't he was disapproving and your mom was like
Right.
smuggling you guys off to the ice rink.
Right. No, no. It's just like there were days we just needed to be there. And before you know it, we wanted to be there versus being around the house where I know he was going to put us to work. But anyway, we grew up and it was predominantly a woman's sport, and Donald, my brother, and I, we became more proficient in ice dancing. Um, because as the girls came up and they started taking their figure tests and dance tests, they needed partners to go through the dance that you see in the Olympics. So Donald was better than I. My older brother was better than I, but we both did very well with our silver. He was pre-gold, so we were able to take the girls through the test for my mom. And it was fine until, going up to high school, nobody was a figure skater. And it got really weird looks if I said that's what I did for my sport. And everybody followed football in Western Pennsylvania. I still remember the first time I went in as a freshman to play. They put me at nose tackle. We didn't have spikes, so I wore tennis shoes. I remember like guys stepping on my feet with their steel tip spikes. I'm in my tennis shoes, and man, that was pain I didn't like. Yeah, which I think probably helped me become a better ball player. But it was the girls didn't like the ice skaters, the guys didn't really respect it. It was time to change sport, kind of thing. But I attribute a lot of my agility to my ability to skate. And besides, I got bigger, and then I was not a normal size on skates. Yeah. So, they called me the dancing bear back then.
So your physique wasn't. You probably weren't going to hang around in figure skating long anyway. Had not.
Yeah, I was not going to be good in leotards. I was not going to be good in those.
Is there any sense in which you wish you'd not succumbed to some of the pressures you were facing at that transition and continued with the figure skating in some way, or at least said, "Hey, I'm not going to stop doing it just because you guys are saying so. I'm stop doing it because I'm done."
Yeah, it was just part of my life. A lot of people go through chapters in their life. We all have a book, and there's chapters, and that chapter basically was finished. It was great, but now, once you get into high school, and then when I went off to Michigan to play there and go to school up there, hockey was big. I try to set. I don't hockey skate very well because there's no picks on it. There's that you have in figure skates. But the bottom line was, no, it was a great experience. My kids grew up and they ice skated. It was great to be able to ice skate. They look, oh my gosh, Dad, you can ice skate. Look at you. Blah, blah, blah. It was all cool. Diversity to me was the best. I did multiple sports. Everybody focuses on one sport these days. You got to play all the sports. Being young, you just don't know what's going to be, your passion. So, parents get involved and force you down a certain way. And then, some people quit the sport because they were forced to do it. Other people's adapt and they go on because they want that competition. But I believe you have to let up and comers do whatever they want, until they are attracted to something that says, this is what I can really do. This is what I can get into. Become a student.
I love that. And I think that's, like you say, often parents try to force their kids down a particular path. And soccer happened to be my main sport growing up. And I remember as I approached being a parent thinking, gosh, I've got to be mindful that I don't either imply or explicitly lead my boys to think that they must enjoy soccer and they must pursue soccer. And I've got 12 and 9-year-old boys, and they are as different from each other as night and day. And I bet you see the same thing with some of your kids. And just the importance as parents of treating each kid as their own unique human, helping them to learn about themselves and the kind of human they are and about their strengths and about their challenges and how to use both of those things to deploy themselves as an adult even more productively and enjoyably. I think that's one of the key challenges of parenthood, because we bring our own stuff into parenthood and our own challenges from our own childhoods. And we can often then begin to visit those things upon our kids unconsciously in ways that do them harm. And so I really appreciate that perspective that, hey, no, let's be mindful of kind of each unique kid's wiring and what might serve them well to pursue. Let's bump forward now in your timeline, and let's do sort of some rear view. You said before we got on this recording that reflection is not your strong suit, and here I am asking you to do all this reflection because you're a forward looking and moving guy and always have been. And in fact, you said that for you there's some fear behind that if I don't keep pushing, if I don't keep proving myself every day, then you're screwed. Like, that's strong language around a motivation for continuing to strive and grow. So you're always a forward-looking guy, but what I want to do is try and capture the benefit of your hindsight for our listeners and for myself. So today at 67, almost 68, I mean, you've had high levels of success in your chosen sport, high levels of success in your business career later on, especially according to the normal metrics that culture uses to define success: financial bottom line, notoriety, celebrity, achieving at the highest levels of a sport. But today at 67, almost 68, how do you define sex in life? Sex in life, good for me.
It's still as good as ever.
That thought is never far from my mind. So, and there you go. It's like I was giving a talk one time, and I was trying to describe how I was lying prostrate on the ground, and I said, there I was laying prostate on the ground. And so midlife, who knows? Okay, let me see if I can do that one again. Today at 67, how do you define success in life?
Today, success really is based on your choices in life. Of course, being financially comfortable, stable, where you can pay your bills and you don't have to worry about where the next dollar is going to come from. Success is in your children, what they do today. Success is in your relationship that you have, the community that you live in and that you're engaged with. I think success also is on your ability to continue to still impact someone or something in life, no matter what your age is. And I think today people lose a lot of direction when they stop caring about impacting the environment, themselves, or someone else. I relate success to my lifestyle, my health. It's not one thing. Because I've seen very successful people without health, and they give all their money up just to be able to be vital again.
Mm-hmm. One of the V's in the Victor's Code, vitality.
Exactly. And there's no question in my mind, those 7 words, the Victor's Code, really, if somebody applied them to yourselves, and maybe we can talk about those down the way, but success really has been your ability to be comfortable with yourself and be proud of what you've been able to accomplish. Okay. And that the choices in life were made for the right reasons. Okay. And that is really one of my mantras that I live by. Don't make the choices just for personal gain. Make the choices where you can create a win-win environment, because it will come back and lift you higher. There is no one short phrase on success. I think I continue to do what I do because my reward is lifting other people up to success in business. I look for entrepreneurs. I look for people that want more than just going to work in the morning, coming home, and looking forward to the weekend. I look for the people that have a higher aspiration. And so I'm going to represent a vehicle for them and see if they're disciplined enough or tough enough or the chemistry is right for that to happen. That's exciting to me. Getting to meet you. I met you through networking. And this has been, I'm going to invite you to my home when you come out to Charlotte. There's no question in my mind. But the point is this: right now, people need to realize there's just no one formula for success, because on your way up, success has no balance. I don't give a damn what anybody says, Andrew. You can't be great at something and think you're going to keep everything copacetic. It's not going to happen.
Say more about that. What does that mean? So I'm barking up the same tree as you. I think I believe the same thing. So what do you mean by that? Success has no balance.
Okay, when Nancy and I first started out, and this is something that maybe young couples don't do, they don't sit down and talk enough about what they want in life. And once they decide what they would like or see their life, to become, now they have to be able to talk about what are they willing to give up. Okay, because you can't move forward without giving something up. And Nancy and I had this. We wanted to have children, and we had a daughter and then a second. And there was no way that I could spend the time and still be the best father I can be. So I had to make my time special, but she had to make sure everything was right and that the children remembered their dad or whatever. So when I came home that one day a week or one or two evenings that I was home, that we had quality time. I know a lot of fathers that are home full time and have no quality time with their family.
Right. Great point. I just want to double down on that there's, just being present doesn't mean that you're having productive time with your kids. Keep going.
No, and basically Nancy says, I'm going to keep our home. I'm going to keep us our house together. We're going to be a family. You're going to work and do whatever you have to do, and I'll support you the best I can from here. And that's how we became. We moved every 4 years following the next opportunity. Were they all right decisions? No. However, we learned a great deal of those moves and those failures. They weren't ever complete failures because I believe in taking calculated risks, Andrew. Throughout your life, I'm not asking you to be foolish, but I am asking you to take a calculated risk so that you can be all in once you make the decision. The reason why, in my opinion, people fail is because they don't go all in because they're afraid of failing. But if a calculated risk to me is somebody who has weighed out the best case, worst case. And if you can deal with the worst case, why not go full on? And if you don't go full on, then you really didn't want it anyway. And it's not going to happen.
As you were talking about not going all in, I was thinking about football, and I didn't play football, but I can imagine if you don't go all in on a hit, what are some of the potential risks associated with that?
Couple stories. Well, number one, you never want to not be full go on a football field because at any time your career can be over. And playing football doesn't mean you're always nice to the opponents. Okay. So there are shots that are taken that may not be as clean as they should be, but they're still okay. All right. If you're on the field, there's a story that we talk about. There's the shovel principle. Okay. And if somebody is coming out as an offensive lineman, if you can imagine this, as an offensive lineman, you get these linebackers coming full speed, running as fast as they can. And of course, they're picking up speed from 10, 15 feet away. All right. So they're quick. Okay. And football players train on what we call power producing angles when it comes within the line of scrimmage, because you have a short 3-yard square to be very powerful. So you have to know where the power comes from. Well, if you have an angle, the shovel principle, it's very hard to move a shovel back, if it's planted into the ground. If you're up like this, you can knock the shovel right over. That's one thing. Number two, the person who wins is the person who comes in the fastest. On special teams, I was a wedge breaker. My job, back in the day, they would take 4 big people and they'd almost lock arms and they would go in front of the ball carrier. And then upon the hits, the ball player would pick what hole they would be going to and break out. Well, my job was to take 2 or more down of the 4. So basically, I would imagine myself as a tank, okay? If you can imagine a stick of dynamite, being lit, that's the whistle blowing, and now the ball is kicked. You're running down the field. The fuse is getting closer and closer. There's going to be a collision similar to a car wreck, and you are going to throw your body into these 4 men that are large coming at you as fast as they can. Their disadvantage is they wait until the ball is caught and then they run. We've got a 40-yard head start of running full speed. So throughout my career, I never got hurt breaking wedges because I was the guy, the human bullet that was willing to throw himself into a massive humanity. So speed and technique, is very important if you're, working on a football field.
So there's so much in that metaphor. I mean, I think as in football, so in life. I think it sounds like it's not only more effective to have speed and technique on your side, it's also safer. I mean, this wedge busting was an extremely dangerous part of your job.
Yeah.
But, on the football field, if you're not going hard and staying aware, then somebody else is. And I mean, they're going to hit you, and it could be a blindside hit, and, it could be career ending. And I mean, the parallels with life are so clear. And like you said, when we don't go all in, we're at greater risk, I think, than if we're willing to go ahead and go all in on that calculated risk. Because like you said, you're not advocating foolishness or imprudence, but we often mask our own fear and our own reservations about going for it under prudence, or it's just too risky. When in fact, I think we're saying the opposite. To not go all in is actually more risky. And I think one of the tragedies in the game of life that we risk is failing, because you and I were talking earlier, saying one of your fears is not becoming who you can be. And I think that's one of the great tragedies that we risk, is if we're not willing to go all in at those critical moments, then we don't know what we're capable of. We don't know what our contribution in the world can be.
So big. And adding on to that, I'm not saying for anybody to go all in without training or without preparing. You got to understand, we train daily. I mean, I was bench pressing 500 pounds.
Holy smoke.
Yeah. I wanted to be tested. I trained hard. I wanted to see what I could do. You got to understand that. But on the flip side, I was an offensive center, and I snapped for field goals, extra points, and punt snaps. Today is different than when I played. When I played, you could hit the center while he was snapping the ball, as soon as he moved the ball. Today, you're not allowed to hit the center. Okay. So there I was. My job was to snap the ball for a field goal or extra point, and that needed to arrive at 0.25 seconds with the strings facing the goal post. So it's revolutions. When we snapped on a punt, it was 0.75 or 0.8 on your snap. It needed to be on the right side or the left side, depending on your punter. And you had a job to do, knowing you were going to get blasted. So back in the day, I snapped the ball, and the two offensive linemen next to me would tuck their head and shoulder behind my legs to hold me in place to take the hit. So I was happy to run down and blast somebody. I was back, but I had to make the decision to do my job first. That was important. So you sacrifice something, but you had to do your job because the team was depending upon it. And this is what people don't get. They're not willing to do what they've got to do to make the whole better, because either they want to shine or they're too busy looking at somebody else.
That's awesome. I love that metaphor. That just rings so true. And pictures like that just preach so much better often than the multitude of words we might be able to say. I want to circle back to a couple of things that you brought up. One was, what did you say? Success.
Yeah. In success, there is no balance.
And I really want people to hear that, because I believe that's true too. And one of the things that I encourage people to embrace more than trying to pursue balance in life, which I think is on one level, and this may be stating a little bit too strongly, but on one level, I think pursuing balance is a fool's errand. I think a better thing is to pursue growing in our ability to manage life's many tensions, because life is full of tensions. And you were talking about you and your wife explicitly negotiating your roles in the family. And there's tension inherent in that, because, your wife wants you around, and that's good news, because it would be bad news if she didn't want you around, and your kids want you around, and that's good news. And it would be bad news if they didn't. And work wanted you around, and you wanted to be at work, and you also wanted to be with your family. There's a lot of tension in that system. And if we're trying to achieve balance in that system, then I think we will continually frustrate ourselves and others and feel as if we're short of the mark. But if we're able to say, hey, there's tension in this system, how can I grow in my ability to manage this tension? Which, by the way, if any part of that tension went away, suddenly I've lost something huge. If you decided, you know what, I'm gonna resolve this tension by being all work. Well, then in time, there's no family. Or if you resolved it all in favor of family, then in time, work goes away. That's bad. And so, what I saw, based on what you described, you and your wife doing, was saying, "Hey, we've got this tension. We've got roles to fill. We've got a family and we've made some decisions about choosing to have a family, which has created some complexity. On the one hand, it would be easier to manage just the tension between you and your wife and work, for example. But for the listeners, what I want them to especially get from your example is that you and Nancy sat down and discussed this and said, how are we going to do this in this season of life? And you negotiated roles and you negotiated time put in and time away and those kinds of things. And it sounds like it wasn't perfect. Of course, it never is, but you were able to manage those tensions overall successfully through your kids' development so that you were succeeding at work, you and your wife were succeeding at home with your kids. And I think many of us as parents and as couples fail to do that, to just have those explicit negotiations about the tensions that we're experiencing and how can we manage them together. So I appreciate that example.
Well, it's important to me because if we both agree, then if something does not get done, the consequences, we can both deal with them. Ironically enough, this morning, we're looking to do some things here at the house. And it's a large investment that we probably won't get back, but it's something we want. And we had to have this decision. Do we want to spend this money to get something? And I said to her, the house is not going to be able to be sold to be able to get this back. So it has to be what we want. I want you to get full enjoyment. If we make this commitment, know what it means, And so we made the decision that we'll move forward because we both enjoy where we live and we want it to be our forever home, kind of thing. So we're going to make it very special. But it's through our whole life, we've done that and it's helped our relationship. And again, there's something called lifestyle medicine, and lifestyle medicine has been based on what the human body can actually accomplish when it's in homeostasis, meaning when it's working correctly. And part of that is, relationship. That's believe it or not, that's part of lifestyle medicine to allow your body to eliminate some of the stresses that may hold it back from becoming very healthy. So, it's funny, all the things that are being identified today about this journey we live between birth and death. And that's why I was attracted to your whole concept of what you're doing. And let me just say to you how much I appreciate you diving into this side of life, because it's nothing to be afraid of, but it's something to really learn from. So thank you.
Something to be aware of, for sure. Oh, my pleasure. And I appreciate that acknowledgement. Man, I could literally keep talking to you for a long time, but I know you've got stuff to do and we got to move on with your day. So I'm going to try and start landing the plane here.
Okay.
And these final few questions, I hope will especially bring out a little more gold from your story for our listeners. And it seems that you've found your path in life, a path that suits you better than the many others that you might have taken would have served you. And along that path, you've really tapped into some purpose and some meaning in your life. And there are going to be some folks listening to this podcast who are listening to it specifically because they're lacking some of that and they're trying to figure themselves out. And one of the things I hope to do in the world as a coach is help people understand themselves better, enjoy themselves more, and live the lives they were made to live. So you have been one of the fortunate ones to find a path that has been then paved with purpose. What would you tell someone with the benefit of your life experience? What would you tell someone who's struggling to discover their path and to find purpose along it?
I think it all begins with one's why, and purpose and why are very close, but I found the most successful people started out with the why, their vision of how it could be. And that is being able to see oneself within the dream. People always say, Dennis, well, you keep saying vision. Well, yeah, okay. Well, it all starts with dreams. Where do you see yourself? Allow yourself not to put any restrictions on yourself and find out what you really aspire to be. What is your dream? And once you define your dream, I want you to think about, how do you fit into that dream? Can you actually see yourself doing what you're dreaming about? Well, that's when the vision starts to get carved out, which is really important to what we do. And so once you have that, then you have to find the option. You have to find out the vehicle, because some things just don't work for people. And that's only because they're grasping for things to make their vision to become a victory or a reality. You can't jump at the first thing. You've got to believe in finding something you can become passionate about. If you can't become passionate about something, it becomes really hard to do, because then you're always working for a living. I don't consider what I do work. I consider it as making a difference, and it's easy to get up in the morning and make it happen. Once you find that, then you really have to basically start thinking out. It's like a regular business. What is the plan of action? And to do that, you've got to find information about the direction you're going. Once that's done and you see a plan, now you have to have the courage to make it, I call it valor. You have to have the courage to take the first step and get through it. So right in what I told you there, talks a little bit about vision. Then it talks about valor, the courage. Then it talks about the passion or the energy, the vehemence. Okay. I talked about recognizing that do what you want to do. That's the veracity. That's speaking the truth on a regular basis. Then you've got to be conditioned to go the journey. So that's why vitality becomes a big part of it, because you can't let your health go if you're going to make it, if you're going to get there. It takes time. And then ultimately you find your victory. Okay. So all of those things fall into alignment during the pathway to success, and anyone can do that. Do not make excuses that you don't have the talent or you don't have the options, because I'm in a business that you literally can get started for less than $500, and compete with the big people online today.
And thanks for taking us through the 7 V's there, from vision to victory. And in reading that part of your book, it really reconnected me with some things that I sort of lost in the shuffle. And I think the key one was vision. I've got a couple dream boards up in my office, and I was in the habit of sort of looking at them. But then when I read your book, I realized I've gotten out of the habit of actually revisiting my dreams on a regular basis and continuing to populate myself in them and to see myself in them. And I appreciate what you said about allow yourself to dream, allow yourself to want without abandon, without censoring those wants and desires. And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up, is it okay to dream a dream and to really want it? And I think you and I would both say absolutely. In fact, the dream isn't the only thing, but it really is the first thing. And I love how you take it from dream to vision. You say the dream is the biggest picture, and then the vision is the laser focus on precisely what that might look like. And now you can begin to actualize a plan. And so I just wanted to share with you that those parts, especially of the Victor's Code, have had an impact on my life only recently. And I appreciate how you've not only, it's amazing that you found 7 V's, by the way. That was like,
Hey,
that's the genius.
he says my vocabulary is not that good.
That's right. But that's made a difference in my life. Thank you for that advice for our listeners and for me about path and purpose. So here's a little more personal question. If you knew you were going to die 5 years from today, you knew without a shadow of a doubt that 5 years from today, Dennis Frank snuffs it. He is no more on the face of the planet. Where he is unknown, but he's no longer here. What would you start doing differently today?
Oh, God, that is such an amazing question. Well, the first thing that came to mind is that I want to be close to my partner, Nancy, through my entire life, and I want to spend more time with my daughters. That would give me more time with my grandchildren. I could not give up what I do. You've got to understand, I don't know what I mean, but I know I have some 200,000 people around the world that do what was started with marketamericanshop.com. And we're sort of the beacon light for those people. I don't ever want to stop shining. That's why legacy is so important to me. Doing the things, video, this podcast, I'll share with those people. A lot of people don't know everything about me, and where I came from. But I don't think I've changed a whole lot. I just try to love more. I try to love more and try to influence or tell the story maybe more, and hope in the next 5 years that I get to see something special with my grandchildren, knowing that they're that generation will be here when I'm not. And maybe there'll be some stories, or they'll run into people and say, I knew your grandfather.
One of the things I'm coming to appreciate about you so much is that with the life that you've lived so far, it would be very easy to hold out the accolades as the thing that you lead with, or the business accomplishments as the thing that you lead with. But throughout our conversation, what's continued to bubble to the top has been the relationship component, that it is about the people. And, that jives, by the way, with all of the research done anecdotally and scientifically to confirm what people regret most when they die. And that is things like, I wish I hadn't worked as much. I wish I'd spent more time with my family. I wish I had, taken some of those risks in life. So I'm so impressed with the fact that relationships bubble to the surface, because so many other things could bubble to the surface for you. You're holding out financial accomplishments and accomplishments on the gridiron. In closing, this is the final question. What do you hope that we'll take away from your story?
I hope that those listeners that take the time to hear what we've spoken about would say, I remember this interview from Andrew, this guy by the name of Dennis Franks. He's not a household name. In fact, he was somebody who worked his way up, had multiple failures in his life, but keep getting back up and brushing himself off and moving forward. He never stopped to recognize what he had accomplished. He only moved forward to continue to make a difference. And I've learned a lot in helping to make a difference, that success follows, because the people that you touch and make that difference, they won't forget you ever. And as a result, things happen, networks grow, opportunities continue to grow, and so forth.
And again, remember that Dennis's book that he co-wrote with his 40-year friend, Vince Papale, whose story is captured in the movie Invincible with Mark Wahlberg, The Last Laugh. This is available. And what is the best place to go to find this book?
You can go to Amazon.com. You can look in most book stores online will have it, or you can go to DennisFranks.com. And if you buy your book through DennisFranks.com, I'll also send you some special photographs and signatures that will accompany it.
Bam, got mine. There's the Last Laugh picture. I got my special.
Hey, that's a Hall of Famer.
That's awesome. Right, and where else can people find you online, Dennis, who would want to connect with you?
Sure. Facebook, Instagram, just / Dennis Franks. LinkedIn, I do a lot on LinkedIn. And again, it's just / Dennis Franks. My biggest thing, I'm not really sure. Sure, everybody wants a following. I'm not really sure. I don't go after it too much, but I find that I'm being followed because I'm sharing the things that I learn along the way. And there's always something new. And that's sort of why people want to follow me.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dennis. Fear gets a bad rap. We're always trying to overcome it or get rid of it. But if Dennis's story is any indicator, then the value of fear is hard to deny. The fear of death, maybe even more specifically, the fear of not living the life he was capable of living, motivated Dennis to quit cocaine cold turkey after a season of aimlessness post-football and turn his life around. That watershed moment set him on a very different path than the self-destructive one he'd been headed down. I'd call fear a literal lifesaver in Dennis's case, not an enemy to be overcome. And as Dennis said, if you're willing to face your fears, you can get through them. Lise LaRue rang the same bell in episode 6, The 9 Lives of Lise LaRue, one woman's mind-blowing tale of living with a terminal diagnosis. I think a key to tapping into fear's potential power in our lives is teaching ourselves to become its boss. I unpack that further in episode 5, How to Become the Boss of Your Fear, Bravery Building to Live with More Guts and Gusto. And that's precisely what Dennis did. He summoned the courage to overhaul himself from the inside out when an encounter with mortality filled him with fear. He's been looking ahead and pushing ahead in life ever since. What a gift that fear was to Dennis. Are you holding back in life? Not going all in, as Dennis said, because of some fear or another? Take a page from Dennis's playbook. Consider the best and worst case scenarios. And if you can deal with the worst case scenario, then why not go all in? On their deathbeds, people regret not going for it, far more than they regret mistakes made when they did go for it. And the world needs you, bringing your very best into the game of life. Full tilt, all in, charging ahead with guts, gusto, and purpose to become the person you are made to be and live the life you are made to live. Remember, you are going to die, but you aren't dead yet, so get after it. I can help you charge ahead with guts, gusto, and purpose to become the person you are made to be and live the life you are made to live. Connect with me on Facebook or Instagram at Andrew Petty Coach. Visit digdeepwinbig.com or email me at andrew@digdeepwinbig.com. I'm so glad you tuned in today. Don't forget to follow this show, and I'll see you next time on Andrew Petty is Dying.